Hi everyone, I'm Luke Hector and you're watching The Broken Meeple. This is a YouTube channel about board games where I give reviews, top 10s and my honest opinions, regardless of the consequences.
Get on with it.
Whoo-hoo, have people been waiting for me to talk about this game or what? This is the new release from Board & Dice, Nucleum from Simone Luciani and David Turksey, and I need to get a few things off my chest before I get started on this review. Firstly, yes, a review copy from Board & Dice. Always like to at least make that clear. Secondly, it has to be said, a background to this game, there are a few things that would make people go, uh-oh, when they see me come towards it. Firstly, Simone Luciani. Luciani's games have been mostly misses for me as opposed to hits, and the less said about Lorenzoni Magnifico, the better. But, that being said, there are some of his games that I have at least played and enjoyed. I believe Newton and Golem would feature quite heavily in that regard. But then the other thing is that this game is portrayed essentially as a kind of almost like a pseudo-sequel to the likes of Brass and Barrage. Now when it comes to Brass, my thoughts are kind of on the line of Get out! Get out of there! And when it comes to Barrage, my thoughts are more along the line of
No! God! No! God, please, no! No!
Yeah, suffice to say, those two games, when you tell me that this game is basically similar to those two, that's not exactly putting it in the best of light for me. I do not like Brass at all, and I cannot stand Barrage. Barrage is one of my most hated games I've ever played, and I know there's going to be fans of both of those games. That's fine. I just cannot stand Barrage and don't like Brass. So, jumping into this probably sounds like the most suicidal thing I could do in board games ever, but open mind, wanted to go in and see if it could still be a good fun game, because, just because the original ones aren't as good for me, doesn't mean that you can't improve in a sequel. Doesn't mean that, certain design choices that you omit from one and put in another could make things better. And I wanted to check this out and see if it could do the trick. Here goes.
Does anyone want to get out?
Now there's certainly a lot in this game to talk about, so I'll try and be as brief as I can. Nucleum is effectively a game where you're trying to power up buildings all over the map that players will build utilizing coal and nuclear energy. Primarily nuclear energy, but you gotta start off somewhere and you begin with coal. The idea is that these nuclear power stations will be on the board and players will be able to build certain buildings like houses and factories and such on the map in order to set them up for lighting with the fuel. But you have to connect them up to your network, so you also have to use your railway tiles in order to connect districts to each other in order to expand your network and allow you to build in different places. On top of the buildings, you can also build what I like to call miniature suns, in the case of yellow, but in this case they're basically turbine fans that enable you to use more radioactive material when you need it, but also mines in order to store the various uranium pieces once you get hold of them. The core of the game mechanism revolves around these action tiles, where you essentially have a multi-use function for these. You have one of three options. You can recharge, which is basically a refresh term where you get points and a few other bits and bobs, like money and people. But the main two things you can do is with these action tiles. These have actions on them of different types, and you either play them down on the board as a railway link, so that you lose the tile, but you effectively expand your network, or you play them above your board and resolve both of the actions that are on there. If you place it as a railway link, if you can match the colors to the district, then you can also do the actions on there. These actions range from actually building the buildings, or energizing the buildings, or getting more action tiles, or getting these contracts, which are essentially little mini objectives you can complete during the game. Of course, you're going to be getting in each other's way because some people will want to go to places and build up there, and you're going to get in their face and build networks in front of them. But you can also collaborate on railway links so that it's not just me that wants to go down to here. Somebody else can come along and go, well, you know what? I'll finish that railway for you, and we both get a share of the prize.
Never!
But you can also unlock technologies which slide into your little sideboard here, and these represent one-off cool bonuses or endgame scoring or perpetual abilities that you have for the rest of the game. What you're primarily trying to do is level up this star track here for achievements. You get achievements by lighting up the buildings, and obviously to light up the buildings you need to use coal and uranium and power them. But what you do is that you collect up these achievement stars, and then as you do a recharge action, you level up on this track here depending on how many of those stars you've collected. And these tracks here will have various milestone markers which are for endgame scoring, and you basically are trying to position yourself on that track in such a way that you'll score a lot of points for whatever path strategy you're following. There could be some milestones on there that want you to build very heavily into factories. Okay, fine, well I'm going to build up all my factories, get the milestone markers multiple times so that when I get to the endgame scoring I get like 7 times the number of factories I build, you know, some really cool multiplier. The game carries on until a set number of endgame triggers are met, which could be anything from 70 points on the track to having all the contracts run out, to having all the action tiles run out, to everybody recharging 3 times, for technologies, like somebody getting all their technologies out. There's various different ways the game can end, and depending on how players will play, that will dictate how the game's going to end. But once it happens, you have a final scoring phase, and of course, tally up the points.
I don't get it.
A very brief rule summary there because there is quite a lot going on in this game. But I've already mentioned what this game is similar to. Brass and Barrage, yes. It's impossible not to put those in the same boat as this when you're comparing it. However, I feel that the comparison to Barrage is a little bit on the skewed side because honestly, the only thing that I got from this that I got from Barrage was the fact that you're using power plants to generate electricity. That's kind of it, really. Both games have a map that you build on and get in each other's faces, but Barrage is super mean, like stupidly mean, and I hate the game for it. It is so punishing, so mean it's unreal. This isn't anywhere near as punishing or mean as Barrage is, and Barrage has various mechanisms that aren't replicated in here either, so I don't really feel that other than from a slightly thematic perspective, you're really getting much out of Barrage. So really it's Brass that you've got to compare this to, and there is a lot of similarities there. The idea of building up on the board, connecting all your networks, putting down railway links, you know, sort of half collaborating but half getting in each other's faces with other players, building buildings off your board in the order that you kind of choose. You know, yes, you don't have cards anymore. The cards were dual use in the past, I believe, or at least you could potentially use them as a dual use with the wild rule. But here you've got the same sort of thing with action tiles, except now the action tiles themselves not only have multiple actions but also multiple uses on your board or on your railway link. So there is enough differences to say that this is not the same game as Brass or Barrage in any respect. If you own both of those and if you like both of those, it's possible to like and dislike this in a different way. And I would also imagine that you could own Brass and own this without really much overlap. There's enough differences here. It's just from a feel and a thematic perspective, it is borrowing a lot of stuff from Brass. So you know what, let's start on the highest point for me in this game, and that is this action tile system. I wasn't a big fan of the card system in Brass. There was too many opportunities where you draw the cards, you don't get the cards you need, and then there's a critical moment where you must do this thing or you're screwed, and then you realize you don't have the cards to do it, and you're kind of screwed. This is a much better system. These action tiles. Firstly, having 2 actions on the tile already gives them multiple use, and I love multi-use cards, multi-use tiles, whatever, same thing. But the idea that it's not just what actions are on the tile, it's also whether you're going to play them above your board in order to do the actions, or whether you're going to place them on the board to connect up a railway link. You know, you look around and think, well, there's a purple and a white. Well, I mean, that's multicolored, but that's orange. I'm only going to be able to do one of these actions. But it might be a 2-3 part railway, in which case you're only going to get 1 action. Well, great. I'll do this 1 action in order to get to build something, and then I'm hoping that other people will come by and build. But the idea that you have to juggle these things around, and you can get more. It's not that you have a deck of cards and you just draw from that throughout the game. No, you have a set amount of tiles to begin with, and they're slightly different from other players. But you then have to go and buy other tiles with an action for develop. And there's several on offer, and they range from duplicating the same action to giving you discounts, to giving you extra stuff, to simply leveling up your tracks for income and resource generation. You know, there's a lot of cool things that you can do with these tiles, and it's not that you can occasionally end up with a situation where you don't have the tile to do a specific action that you really must do or you're toast. But it really does happen a lot more less often. It's less often than it did in Brass, and you can see kind of ahead of time if you're failing on a particular action. You look at your tiles and go, oh my god, I don't actually have any contract actions. I can't actually take a contract. There's one in the offer for the tiles. Maybe it'll be a good time if I actually bought one of these now. I can choose to go fetch it. It's up to me. I don't feel like there's a luck of the draw element here because you don't draw them from a stack. You know, different ones will come out for offer, yes, but you have all your tiles available to you. I don't have them, say, in a face-down stack, and in every turn I draw 3 and see what I can do with those 3. No, everything's on offer.
The problem is choice.
The game also feels a little bit more flexible than, say, the Brass and Barrage of its time. With those games, you were kind of restricted as to where you could go, and if you didn't build up your network well enough, you were kind of screwed. Here, though, from the get-go, you are allowed to build anywhere on the board. Okay, great, I can do that. But then, obviously, you can only build in certain areas that are connected to your railway links or where you already have a building placed. But if you want to expand your network, say, across the other side of the board where you're nowhere near, all you've got to do is place a railway link down. You just place a railway link down. So let's say I'm here. This is my first railway link and I'm connected up to these 2 bits. I'm nowhere near this one. Well, you know what? I can solve that. Railway link. Put a railway link down, and now I'm connected to this bit as well. It's like 2 separate little mini networks. But that's so much more relaxed and with so much more freedom. But it's not like you have free reign over everything. People can still block you out of different districts, and there is still a limit to how many tiles you can really shove down as railway links before you need to keep buying more or you run out of the decent actions. I mean, it's a hard choice to decide which tile you're going to put down a lot of the times because you're like, oh, but that was a good tile and I need those actions, but the colors match and I do need to go there. I don't know. And, you know, that gives you a lot of decent turn angst for putting them down, but at least I don't have to feel that I'm stuck in one corner and I can do nothing for the whole game. I mean, if you do end up stuck in a corner and you're not putting railway link tiles down, well, that's kind of your own fault. And you obviously have to be mindful of how many connections there are to districts so that you don't get completely blocked out. Learning the game is fairly straightforward for a heavy Euro. I'm not going to say that this is an absolute cinch, but I've taught this game many times, and really the only actions that require a little bit more explanation are how networks work, because they are a major deal, and the energizing action itself with using uranium pieces and coal in that. That requires the most explanation. But a lot of the other actions are pretty straightforward. I mean, contract, take a contract, put it on your board, get a bonus, done. Action tiles, grab action tiles, go in your supply. When you want to play them, put them above your board. You can do a contract or put them upside down, stick them on a, put them on a railway track. Okay, nice and simple. Build, right, well, you can build something from here, pay the money, stick it on your network. Pay from here, pay in people, stick it on your network. There really isn't a lot of complication in this game. There's the odd little micro rule, but they're few and far between, and the reference aids that you have for each player are pretty decent, actually. I mean, they're based on the different technology groups, so everyone's asymmetric slightly, and it tells you all the technologies, tells you exactly how to do a recharge turn, tells you all the actions in the game, and a decent bullet point list of how they work, and then also the what you do on your turn and some considerations about completed railway lines and endgame triggers. These 2 reference aids are really good. David Turksey has lent his usual shtick with the solo mode. It comes with a separate solo rulebook, and as you can imagine, it's not the shortest thing you're going to learn in a while. However, credit where it's due. David Turksey's a lovely bloke. He puts up with a lot of shtick from me. And one thing that I like in solo modes is being able to just get it out and play it as if it was a multiplayer game without too much faff controlling something else, which is why complex AI solo modes, a bit like what Paul Grogan said on a recent video he did for Evacuation, I don't tend to go for those complex AI ones because it's too much to control. This one is an AI that you control. But compared to a lot of David Turksey's other stuff, this is probably one of the easiest ones to pilot. You go pilot something like the AI out of Perseverance or something.
This is light.
and compare it to this is like light years easier to operate. Yes, there's a little miniature rule book, but the flowchart for what the process of their turns are is pretty straightforward. The actions that the AI does is pretty straightforward. Really, the most fiddly aspect is the fact that you constantly have to resolve a tiebreaker as to which way it will go and which path it will do, which is handled by a small deck of cards which you just flip over and look at what the priority is. You know, highest number on the board, lowest number, you know, start at this and go clockwise. And as long as you've got that in your head, the rest of the AI is actually pretty straightforward. I had some fun solo games of this. It replicates effectively a 2-player game, and honestly, I think I'd rather pull out the solo mode than play this 2-player, honestly. The game works at 2-player, but I did find that maybe it's just a little bit, even with the revised set of the board, it's a little bit too open and you lose some of that multiplayer interaction that you get in a 3- and 4-player game. But if you're going to play this solo, then be proud that this is actually a pretty decent mode and isn't going to be one of those, oh, I've got to spend forever doing this for the AI. All right, they go there, and then they do this, and then flip a card and do all this, and let me check the flow chart and go 5 miles down. I mean, you want a really high flow chart, go play Patoku, oh my god. But this one felt like a pretty streamlined affair. Not flawless, there was a couple of times where I had to sort of like keep checking the rule book and just go, hang on a minute, how's that work? And certainly the Baron's Railway requirements and stuff like that is going to require a little bit of a test to get it stuck in your mind, because, you know, the back reference guide is good up to a point, but there are 1 or 2 things I think they could have elaborated on just to make it a lot clearer, so I didn't have to check the book for those little bits. But honestly, I enjoyed my solo play of this, and if you're worried about getting this to the table by yourself, don't be. It's solid.
This is why Superman works alone.
Aesthetically, this game is not exactly a looker. Honestly, the best looking thing in this game is the cover. Yeah, the rest of this is pretty bland. You look at the rest of this board, and it is basically this like weird collage of mucky green and then just a few little districts. It's not exactly going to turn heads, and one thing I've noticed is that the board has nothing to distinguish colorblindness. I played this at HandyCon with somebody who was fairly colorblind. I had to mark specific districts on the board with tokens from a non-player piece in order to get them to realize which ones were green and which ones were orange. Nothing here distinguishes colorblindness. And I cannot believe in this day and age we are still falling for this trap. You know, this would have been an easy thing to have like different iconography or a little symbol in the corner of a district to tell you that this is a particular type of district. But no, there is nothing here to distinguish it. But the rest of the game is still fairly bland looking. I mean, these achievement stars, cardboard tokens, you know, these little factory things, they're nice, but they're nothing major. I can't really give them credit for these plastic Nucleum pieces because I think these were an SM promo. The tiles, cardboard, the technology boards, I mean, these are really flimsy. You know, they're pretty spindly, and I'm worried that I'm going to snap one of these pieces off if I like jiggle it too hard. And trying to actually get your technology piece in these things is a bit of a chore because they don't fit in quite as easily as you would hope. And then your board, I mean, your board's a nice enough dual layer board with, you know, bits that you slot stuff in. That's pretty cool, and this is probably the best component in there. But yeah, it's not that the components in this are bad, but it doesn't really get any brownie points either.
Overall, I would rate it a C+. Okay? Not great.
There are some swingy aspects in this game that I'm not a fan of. The main one being the contract tiles. I think this is the weak link of the game, and it really does affect my enjoyment of it in a big way, because you essentially have only 2 of each type of contract on show. You've got silver and gold, and there's only 2 of each, and it doesn't matter what player count you're at. That's the way it is. There's only 2 of each. The problem is that these contracts are incredibly swingy because you have to basically shuffle them up at the start, like I mentioned, but then only 2 of them are out, and not all of them are in the game. So you might be working on a particular path, like, oh, I happen to be building all the oranges, and none of the contracts that say build on oranges come out. So you've been wasting your time doing that. But then you could literally have a time where somebody takes a contract that says, okay, I've taken this contract, fine. And then the next one comes out that says, have you built 2 turbines? Well, the next player before you has built 2 turbines, and then instantly goes and picks up the contract and completes it and gets a cool load of rewards. By complete fluke. And this is quite a big deal in a 2 to 3 hour Euro game that has a decent amount of skill involved to have this swingy element, because it's not like these bonuses are a small thing. You take the contract and you get something useful on your board. Then you complete the contract and you can get money, you can get people, you can get technologies. You know, the points for these can be quite significant. And, you know, these leg ups are fundamental to doing well in the game. So to have one literally just pop out of the deck and go, well, that was convenient, you got it, great. But then you might have one where it's like, well, I was building a bunch of factory buildings, great. Any of the contracts for factories coming out? No? No? Still nothing for the whole game? And then last couple of turns of the game, oh, now a factory contract comes out. Well, it's a bit late now, isn't it?
Well, that was pointless.
The game is a complete chore when it also comes to the setup, and it's a massive table hog to boot. This thing takes up so much space on the table that I can't even fit it in the inlet of this gaming table. I have to have it here with the leaves on because you've got this massive board, and then you've got your player board, and then you've got your technology spindly tree thing, wherever that's gone. I seem to have lost it all of a sudden. Oh, there it is. And so you've got this on the side, as well as all the pieces. And oh yeah, did I mention you also need this on the side? This thing takes up a ton of space on the board, maybe more than it actually needs to. So big tables, necessity.
Please excuse the crudity of this model. I didn't have time to build it to scale or to paint it.
But the setup, also quite a chore. I mean, yes, it actually explains it well in the book, but there's a lot of occasions where you've got to do lots of annoying little separate this and then shuffle this bit and then mix them together nonsense. The action tiles, you've got to find all the ones with dots on and then all the ones that don't. Then separate those out, then shuffle each pile and then mix so many based on player count and then put them into 3 stacks. It's like, oh my Christ. And then the contracts, you've got to separate the silver and the gold and then shuffle them and then by player count. Right, how many do I need to put in? I need to put in this many and this many and then lay them out on the offer. Okay, fine. And in neutral buildings, you have to basically go through this deck of setup cards and then lift them off, and this tells you where you put this building and where you put this nucleum and where you put these buildings. It's like, for crying out loud. You know, this game goes on, waffles on a lot in terms of getting the setup done. The technologies also feel a little bit like basic. They're not that interesting. You know, normally in a game when I get technologies to level up and I'm like, oh cool, I get to unlock a new tech, oh, new ability, yay. These ones feel very mediocre. There are some that are worth taking, you know, like, oh yeah, that was a cool one-off bonus, but the ones that give you a perpetual ability for the game are kind of meh. In fact, especially with the low-level ones, I've actually found that this is one of the few games where when I get something that says you unlock a tech, I'm like, oh, whatever, I guess this one then. And that's not the feeling I want when I unlock cool abilities and techs. They just don't feel particularly powerful, except for some of the one-off bonuses. The one-offs are decent, but they're one-offs. You do it and then it's done. Was it that powerful? You don't really know until much later. And some are certainly, I think, better than others. I mean, being able to just get 8 achievement stars for a tech is pretty good going, given that that's your fundamental means of scoring in the game. But then there's other ones where it's like, whenever you light a building, you get a coin. That's it. When I go through all of this nonsense, I get 1 coin at the end. That's my brilliant technology. It just seems a little bit like, lackluster.
We could use my new invention, a pointy rock tied to a stick.
Now, I comment that I like games where they give me a lot of different paths to victory, a lot of different ways to play the game, try a weird strategy and all that. Sadly, Nucleum doesn't give me that though. It's very one note, a bit like, say, Barrage. In fact, this is kind of like the thing it borrows from Barrage, the one note means of doing well in the game. This game is all about lighting up the buildings and leveling up this achievement track. That is it. There is no weird dodgy, like weird strategy you can do. There's no like out of the box scenario thing that you can do. You must do well on this track to win. Full stop. You cannot ignore this track. It is the game, which means that energizing stuff is the focus point of everything. You want to grab a bunch of action tiles and just focus on contracts or something, ain't gonna score you enough points. You want to, you know, like go down into the expensive Praha area and build a couple of things there, it's not gonna be enough. You want to build stuff off your player board and just like build every single building you've got, doesn't matter, because if you don't light them up, they're not worth points anyway. Everything about your points is pretty much this, which means you can't ignore it. And that's a problem because you have 4 milestone markers on here, which you are scoring for these. And honestly, the one at the very bottom is meaningless. You score so few points for it, who the hell cares? Getting to the very top bit is I've not seen anybody get into this 28 star plus bit. You get 9 bonus points if you can get 40 achievement stars. I've not seen anybody get into the red bracket, let alone get anywhere close to 40 stars. And if I was somehow able to do that, I want more than 9 bonus points, thank you very much, given that you finished the game anywhere between 125 to 200 at times. It's like, what do I care about 9 for all that effort? So you're really focusing on these 2 milestones here, and it's easy enough to like combine it so that I'm doing, you know, 7 times, 9 times, whatever these milestones are. But these are the 2 things that are going to score you the points, which means that this track basically dictates your game plan. You can't ignore this. You know, do I feel like building all my labs and getting techs quick? Well, does the milestone track say that you should get labs? No, it says I should build houses. Well, then you should build houses. But I don't want to build houses. I want to do this game. But it says build houses. But I want to build labs. Tough. You're not going to score any points.
Look, my duty tonight, stop as much peril as I can.
Now we gotta find the Holy Grail. Come on.
It affects replayability because the game is now playing me at that point. I don't get to decide how I play my game of Nucleum. The board has already decided this. I just would have liked maybe a bit more variance in what you can do. Let me do some weird strategy. Let me do something a little bit different. You know, I mean, it doesn't have to be like a Caverna sandbox style game, but I would certainly like maybe to be able to decide, right, here's about 3 or 4 different paths to victory I can take. This game, I feel like doing this path. But nope, the path is set. The path is set. Your future is written. You must adhere to this. You can't deviate because you're gonna lose. Feel free to deviate. You're allowed to deviate. You just won't win.
No, you can't. Don't even try.
So Nucleum has some pros, some cons, but people were expecting me to go into this absolutely hating its guts, and suffice to say I don't. I actually got a decent amount of enjoyment from this game, and there's a lot of stuff I do like. The game is not as complicated as can be. The action tile system is still the highlight and still the focal point of the game, and a really good focal point. The solo mode is not complicated, not stupidly complicated compared to other modes. And there's a decent amount of interaction as well with players. Not so much that I'm directly nicking stuff off you, but you are getting in each other's way. You can collaborate on railways. I'm interested in what they're doing and what action tiles they got left. So I'm not playing a solitaire game when I have 3 or 4 players out, which is why I'd rather play this with 3 or 4 players. I think those 2 are the sweet spot for player counts. So there's a lot of stuff I did enjoy. That's not to say the game doesn't have flaws though. I do think the technologies are pretty lackluster. I do think the contract system needs reworking. I'm going to try that house rule, see if that improves things for me. But yeah, the swinginess of this is dictating a lot of people's ability to do well. And, you know, aesthetically, it's still not particularly a looker, so, you know, and the setup is a bit of a chore. It's not a short game either for what it is. You know, there are some niggles that I do have. But overall, I've enjoyed this game. If somebody wants to play it at a game night, I'll play it. I know I will not touch Barrage with a barge pole. I will more than likely never play Brass again. But Nucleum I would play. That's a step up. A big step up considering people expected me to go into this hating its guts. You know, and granted, given its predecessors, there was adequate scope for me to hate this guts. But nah, I've enjoyed it overall. There are some problems, and I was debating between 2 ratings, but I think there's enough decent stuff here for me to give this one a 7 out of 10. It's good. It's a good game. I will play this. I enjoy playing it. Would I keep it in the collection? Probably not. Although, to be fair, so many other people have this game, I don't need to, because frankly, I think every friend I have has this game, so if I want to play it, it's going to be available, whatever. But, you know, I was contemplating giving it a 6, but I thought that would be a bit too harsh, because overall, I've enjoyed my games of this. The niggles that I have not spoiled the overall enjoyment, or maybe come out of a game going, that sucked, that wasn't really worth it. I've liked aspects of this, and I do, given that this action tile thing is kind of the meat of the game, of what you're doing, the fact that this is probably my highlight of the game certainly has that impact. You know, I wish that some of those problems could be fixed, maybe in an expansion down the line, or just maybe a house rule here or there, but overall, this is still a decent, solid game, just not one that I'm going to sing the praises of. It's probably not going to make a top 10 of the year, but I still enjoyed it, and given, as I said, hate one, dislike the other, that's got to be good praise by itself, right? So that's it for me on this episode of The Broken Meeple. If you like what you see, then please thumb it up on YouTube and thumb it up on Board Game Geek when it goes live on the site, particularly on Board Game Geek. Let's go in there, follow the link in the description, and get a thumb on that page. It would mean the world to me. Of course, check out all the other Essen reviews I have done, Spellbook and Art Society. There's loads I've done, and obviously there's more on the way, like Cut the Horror and series and Path of Civilization. There's plenty more to come. You know, check them all out and let me know your thoughts. Get your comments down below. Are you a massive fan of this game? I'm pretty sure 90% of people watching this video are fans of this game. Presumably you're all fans of Brass and Barrage as well, although I'd be curious to know if you hate those ones and yet still like this. You know, maybe like you come from a background similar to mine. That'd be quite interesting to know. But until next time, remember, regardless of whether you're going to power your buildings with coal or weird green jello, it's still only a game. Bye for now, everyone.